At the networking event, designed to deepen camaraderie between companies, Mr. Robert spotted my wife and me. Without hesitation, he began with an unbelievable remark. "We don't have seats arranged for you guys. Subcontractors should head back home." Then, "Can you call the president right away?" My wife, Jessica, retorted immediately, leaving Mr. Robert with his mouth agape in surprise. "Huh? It's impossible to call our busy president just for subcontractors. We can find a replacement for you anytime. If you can't call the president, we'll be leaving then," as Jessica grabbed my arm and we headed for the exit. President Jason, the president of the contracting company, appeared upon hearing what had happened. His face turned pale and eventually, he began to tremble violently. "I'm Smith, a 42-year-old living happily with my beloved wife, Jessica. I run a manufacturing factory that produces mechanical parts, which was originally owned by my father-in-law. I met Jessica during our college days. Having been fascinated by machinery since childhood, I pursued mechanical engineering in college. I was burning with youthful hope in my heart, wanting to create something new that would shape the society of the future. However, reality wasn't as straightforward, with experiments mostly ending in struggles. Despite feeling defeated, wondering if this was the extent of my capabilities after coming all the way from the countryside, I persevered through countless experiments. Just when I thought it was impossible and faced difficulties repeatedly, feeling utterly lost, it was Jessica who came to my side. Seeing me struggle with an experiment, she quickly solved the problem and told me, "Smith, you were almost there in solving a problem. But the difference between you and me is whether or not we believe it can definitely be done." With a smile, Jessica completely captivated my heart. Believing that something can be done versus giving up, thinking it's possible changes the outcome. Jessica taught me that, and since then I've never thrown in the towel but continued to work on everything until the very end. The result was a strong mentality that even without much basis or experience, if I gave it my all, things would somehow work out. The power to persevere to the end, telling myself that it must somehow work out, became a significant strength in overcoming various challenges in life, and Jessica herself possessed that vitality. One day, she quietly said to me, "I have a dream." "A dream?" I asked, unable to anticipate her response, to which Jessica firmly nodded. "To make my father's factory the best in the States." In the end, Jessica and I continued our university life as good friends. After graduation, I got a job at a local machinery manufacturing plant. I resonated with the attitude of pursuing more precise and advanced technology while conducting technical research there. I reunited with my college classmate Jessica. To my surprise, the factory was managed by Jessica's father. As I tried my best to get accustomed to the job quickly, the president of the factory, Jessica's father, approached me. "So, you're the new guy. I've heard so much about you. You're very enthusiastic about your work, I hear." "Thank you. I'm just happy to be working with machinery every day." I passionately shared my love for manufacturing with the president. I spoke about the expertise and knowledge I had gained in university, and the possible future prospects of the manufacturing industry in the States. Looking back, I realized I had such a big mouth, but the president listened without interrupting, showing genuine interest. "I'm glad to have a passionate young person like you join our company. How about it? Want to learn even more?" After making that proposal, the president began to keep me close, guiding me through the intricacies of the job. Thus, I started receiving direct job training from the president himself. "Smith, you didn't have a girlfriend, right?" "No, not at the moment." One day, when the president suddenly asked me, the first thing that flashed through my mind was Jessica's smiling face from our college days. "How about my Jessica, then? She's about your age and knows the factory work well." And so, our relationship, which I had thought would remain platonic forever, slowly progressed, and after about 2 years of dating, we got married. United in our goal to make her father's factory the best in the States, we embarked on a happy married life. During this time, her father suddenly fell ill. Fortunately, I was nearby and was able to call an ambulance immediately to take him to the hospital. Though he managed to pull through, his already weak heart had taken a toll, leaving him considerably weakened. I've caused you all a lot of worry, but I've seen my daughter in her wedding dress, and a successor for the factory has been found. Honestly, I have no regrets, he said, lying in the white hospital bed, looking pale. Of course, we weren't ready to accept that. It was too early for him to say he was satisfied, we thought. From there on, together with Jessica and the entire factory team, we worked frantically to manage the factory until her father could return. Encouraged by our combined effort to uphold his business, he made a recovery and was able to return to the factory 3 months later. But even though he had recovered, there was always the uncertainty of when he might falter again. Considering his own health issues, he asked me to officially take over the factory while he was still functional. I had been working there and had learned how to manage from him, but still, the initial period was quite challenging. Apparently, I must have looked pretty worn out when I got home, causing Jessica to worry. "Are you okay? Not overdoing it? It's tough, but I want to live up to your dad's expectations. Plus, I don't want to be underestimated just because I'm a young manager. So, I want to study up now." Indeed, after the transition from her father to me, there were some difficult clients who seemed to test our resolve. Yet, with Jessica's support and her father's trust, I've been able to keep pushing forward. Before we knew it, 2 years had passed, and just as I was getting the hang of managing, we discovered Jessica was pregnant. We named our son, who was born without complications, Leo. Holding Leo, my father-in-law couldn't help but shed tears of joy. A man moved to tears, seeing my father-in-law, Jessica, and our newborn son Leo together as 3 generations. Made me naturally smile too. The birth of my precious son has motivated me even more. Thanks to this, I became even more dedicated to my work, discovering my own way of doing things different from my father-in-law's, and overcoming various challenges that followed. About a decade later, I was puzzled when I heard that Mr. John, the manager of one of our major contractors, had been transferred. It was odd timing, and Mr. John had never mentioned his reassignment. Concerned about what had happened to Mr. John, I inquired with someone from his office about his recent reassignment, only to learn that he had apparently been fired. I was shocked at the thought of what kind of mistake he must have made, especially since no details were disclosed, which surprised me even more. But, being from a subcontractor, I couldn't find out more than that, so all I could do was wait for the new manager to take over. I heard the new manager's name was Mr. Robert, and he's about my age. He's reputed to be an elite graduate from a prestigious university, so I braced myself for a long-term relationship. Although I was truly grateful to Mr. John for all his help, I felt a mix of sadness and the necessity to first pay a visit to greet the new manager. After I informed his office of my planned courtesy visit to the new manager, I thought my father-in-law should be aware of this matter involving Mr. John. So that's what happened. "I'll check on it from my end too, so you just focus on the factory work," he said, with a complexity in his expression I had never seen before. This situation took a turn the next day while giving work instructions at the factory, as usual, and making my rounds. A man I didn't recognize appeared, wondering. As we mingled at the networking event aimed at fostering camaraderie among companies, Mr. Roberts' gaze quickly fixed on my wife and me. Without a hint of cordiality, he launched into an unbelievable remark. "We haven't arranged seats for you guys. Subcontractors should head back home. Can you call the president right away?" My wife, Jessica retorted without missing a beat, leaving Mr. Robert open-mouthed in surprise. Huh? It's impossible to call our busy president just for subcontractors. We can find a replacement for you anytime. If you can't call the president, we'll be leaving then, Jessica declared, taking my arm as we made our way to the exit. At that moment, President Jason, the president of the contracting company, emerged, having overheard the exchange. His complexion paled, and he soon began to tremble with intensity. Filled with hope and the ambition to innovate for the future, I faced reality's harshness, my experiments often ending in failure. Feeling overwhelmed and questioning my path, Jessica stood by my side. She not only solved the problem at hand but also taught me an invaluable lesson. The difference between success and failure often lies in our belief in the possibility of success. Jessica's unwavering support and her dream to elevate her father's factory to unparalleled heights became our shared vision. Fast forward, after graduation, I secured a position at a local machinery manufacturing plant, where I discovered Jessica's father was the president. Impressed by my passion, he took me under his wing, offering direct mentorship. This relationship blossomed beyond professional boundaries, leading to Jessica and I transitioning from friends to life partners. United in our mission, we embarked on a fulfilling married life. Tragedy struck when her father fell ill. His hospitalization and subsequent frailty pushed us to the forefront of the factory's operations. Despite his weakened state, he expressed contentment in seeing his daughter married and the factory under capable stewardship. His recovery, bolstered by our collective effort, marked a new chapter for the factory, with me officially at the helm. Navigating the challenges of leadership, Jessica's pregnancy brought a new wave of motivation. Our son, Leo, symbolized the continuation of our legacy, bringing immense joy and determination to further the factory's success. The factory's journey took an unexpected turn with the transfer of Mr. John, a supportive manager from one of our major contractors, and the introduction of Mr. Robert. This new manager, known for his prestigious educational background, brought a wave of discomfort and tension, unlike any we had experienced with his predecessor. Robert's disdain was palpable from our first encounter. Despite his condescending attitude, a surprising connection between him and Jessica came to light, revealing a past intertwined with personal grievances. Despite the challenges he presented, our focus remained on a significant project pivotal to the factory's future. Robert's unprofessional conduct, culminating in a confrontational networking event, tested our resolve. Yet, it was President Jason's intervention that reaffirmed the value of our work and our partnership with the factory. This incident not only highlighted the importance of perseverance and belief in one's vision, but also underscored the strength found in unity and shared goals. In the face of adversity and with the support of my wife and the factory team, we continued to navigate the complexities of the industry. Our commitment to innovation, quality, and the legacy of Jessica's father's factory remains unwavering, as we look towards a future filled with promise and continued success. I offered him a forced smile. "Excuse me, I need to greet some other people." "I'm not done talking to you yet," he retorted. We tried to dodge Mr. Robert, but he seemed determined not to let us go easily. Caught in a difficult situation, Mr. Robert approached me, looking down with an ugly smirk, and declared, "There's no seat prepared for you guys. Subcontractors should head home." "Then could you call the president right now?" Jessica retorted on the spot, leaving Mr. Robert gaping with wide eyes. "Huh? There's no way I can call the busy president just for a small subcontractor. There are plenty of others to take your place." "You're saying you can't call the president? Then we'll have to step down from the project." With that, Jessica took my arm, and we started heading for the exit. Mr. Robert, looking smug as if he had successfully sent us packing, showed no sign of wanting to stop us. That's when it happened. "Smith!" The one who called out to me with a puzzled look was President Jason, the president of the contracting company. I stopped in my tracks and offered a handshake to President Jason. "President Jason, you've arrived early. I heard you were coming, so I thought I'd drop by to catch up with you and ask you about his updates." His likely referred to my father-in-law. I knew that my father-in-law and President Jason had been acquaintances for over 30 years since the establishment of the company, but since my father-in-law fell and I took over, the opportunities to meet had dwindled. "But why are you leaving? The networking event is just about to start." Actually, I explained everything to President Jason. Despite thinking it might be futile, I wasn't particularly close to President Jason, and after all, I was just a subcontractor. It wouldn't have been surprising if he had just laughed it off. But I was hoping for the long-standing friendship between him and my father-in-law to make a difference. As I spoke, President Jason's face turned pale, and he began to tremble. "I'm so sorry, this is entirely Robert's fault. I'll discipline him in a way that satisfies you. Please don't leave." President Jason's desperate attempt to keep us there surprised not only us. "What are you doing, President? These two are just a low-level small subcontractor who lack any respect for their client companies." "And what are you talking about? Haven't you read the documents for this project?" Mr. Robert, who had been laughing and talking, was immediately struck by President Jason's sharp response. He clearly hadn't anticipated being scolded himself. Leaving a gaping Mr. Robert behind, President Jason clung to my hand. "Smith, you can do as you please, and I won't hold you responsible. So please continue with the project. Then I'll take you up on that offer." I waited until President Jason nodded firmly. "What about the networking event then?" "We'll be leaving for today. We need to discuss our strategy, including the possible diversion." At my words, President Jason looked down, clearly disappointed. "I'm really sorry about this whole situation." Once again, we shook hands with President Jason. Jessica and I finally left the venue. As we were leaving, President Jason handed me a small note. On it was the name and phone number of the former manager, Mr. John. I decided to call this number as soon as we got home. Of course, I also had to report this incident to my father-in-law. As we hurried away, the sound of Mr. Robert being sternly reprimanded echoed behind us. The next day, Mr. Robert stormed into my factory, face red with anger. "Hey, bring out Smith. What's the meaning of this? Come out and explain." As soon as he entered the factory, Mr. Robert started yelling. After I received a call informing me that Mr. Robert was at the factory, I met with him in the reception room, where his face was twitching with rage. "What do you mean the project can't proceed without your factory's parts? That information was detailed in the documents beforehand. You decided we were unnecessary and sent us away after reading those, right?" Surprised by my retort, Mr. Robert fell silent. Being silenced by just one comeback seemed to reveal his fragility more than expected. "If that's all you had to say, could you please leave?" I pointed towards the exit, but Mr. Robert weakly shook his head. "Listen, I was told by the president. Is it true you're not participating in this project? Our president and your former president are good friends, right? Think it over." After discussing with the former president, we decided to terminate this contract. "There are plenty of other subcontractors like us, aren't there?" At my words, Mr. Robert turned pale and started sweating profusely. I knew exactly why he was so desperate. Without our factory, the project itself wouldn't stand a chance. The project was actually predicated on using a product for which I hold a patent. The difference in management direction I took from my father-in-law was acquiring that patent. Besides managing the factory daily, I had been working on prototypes of a product. I started researching in college with Jessica's help, who studied with me at the same university. It took us 2 years to finally succeed in its development. Our unique patented product not only contributed to the factory's profits but also led to an upward trend in our financial situation. Hearing about our reputation, this project was put together. In other words, without our product, the large project would go back to the drawing board. Mr. Robert, despite being a participant in the project, was apparently unaware of the situation. Had he thoroughly read the documentation, he would have understood the importance of our factory, but he probably skipped over it, thinking it was just another simple job because we were subcontractors. Don't you have any sense of responsibility? If this project fails, what will you do? If it comes to that, I suppose I'd have to take responsibility. But no worries, we've already signed with another company. Mr. Robert gasped for air and widened his eyes at my words. I almost burst out laughing, seeing his expression. Actually, on the day of the networking event, I called the contact number President Jason gave me for Mr. John. Then I found out Mr. John had started a new company. Actually, I'm receiving support from President Jason. Would you consider signing a contract with us? Mr. John, who reached out to us for a contract, kindly explained what had happened when he left his previous job. It turns out Mr. Robert had been habitually harassed by Mr. John, and he made an initial report of such misconduct to the HR. However, a faction within the company that favored Mr. Robert, led by a vice president, squashed Mr. John's complaints. Thinking he could no longer stand it, Mr. John decided to resign. When he submitted his resignation, President Jason approached him and had already established a new company as a subsidiary. President Jason too was fed up with the vice president's faction and their schemes, but their influence reached deep into the company core, making it difficult for even the president to turn things around. So, they gradually transferred talented employees like Mr. John to the subsidiary. In light of the current situation, President Jason endorsed my factory, which produces indispensable parts, to Mr. John's company. I decided to contract with Mr. John's company moving forward. Explaining this, Mr. Robert turned red with rage. Are you kidding me? If this project isn't realized, then we're losing millions. Just sign a contract with us, quick! But, Mr. Robert, you were the one who discarded us, right? We've already signed a contract with another company that is participating in the project with a new company, so it's impossible to contract with you now. I kept firmly refusing Mr. Robert each time he persistently pleaded with me. After about 30 minutes of this back and forth, Mr. Robert finally realized it was pointless and slumped to his knees. We watched Mr. Robert walk away from the factory with a slouched back, and then we returned to our usual work. Months later, President Jason visited our factory. Since that incident, he has been working on restructuring the company to counter the vice president's faction, including Mr. Robert. I've really caused you a lot of trouble this time. How can I possibly make it up to you? He said with an exhausted face to me. President Jason then began to talk about the aftermath. Allegedly, Mr. Robert was considered competent initially but began to act recklessly as soon as he started receiving favor from the vice president. Moreover, before he was involved with our incident, he had caused similar disturbances in various departments. However, because of his strong connection with the vice president, no one dared to correct him. As a result, Mr. Robert developed the mistaken confidence that, due to his importance, he could act however he wished. This led him to unnecessarily involve us in trouble at the networking event, subcontractors he disliked. Even after being admonished by the president, Mr. Robert showed no sign of remorse. I was just doing my job the way I see fit. There are plenty of factories out there, so it doesn't matter how I treat them, he defiantly stated. This attitude finally angered the usually mild-mannered President Jason, resulting in Mr. Robert being transferred to another department. It may sound like an excuse, But I was on a long-term business trip abroad when Mr. Robert was appointed manager. I received reports but judged only based on performance numbers, failing to grasp his personality, which led to this trouble, President Jason explained, apologizing again. Some time later, I received a call from an acquaintance at another company, informing me that Mr. Robert had resigned. Though he avoided being fired after the vice president faced numerous allegations and resigned, the story somehow leaked, subjecting him to cold stares from everyone in the company. Moreover, he was transferred to a section where he is tasked to compile the company's history, essentially a menial job with no significant responsibilities. Obviously, it's a task to gently kick him out. Feeling unable to endure such a position, Mr. Robert voluntarily resigned. He might have had a difficult personality, but he was smart, Jessica commented upon hearing the news, acknowledging Mr. Robert's capabilities. He had made significant achievements to be recognized as a manager by President Jason, at least on paper. However, his promotion led to overconfidence, culminating in this debacle. Perhaps it was my presence that spurred his actions, I speculated. It turns out Mr. Robert, who was a classmate of Jessica's in high school, had feelings for her. In his misguided attempt to gain her attention, he repeatedly demeaned a factory owned by Jessica's father, ultimately causing Jessica to detest him. I told him, "Don't ever talk to me again. I don't even want you near me," she recalled, marking the end of their relationship. Just as Jessica declared, there was no contact from Mr. Robert after high school graduation. Yet, after becoming a professional and learning that his company did business with Jessica's factory, he, filled with confidence from his position as a manager, tried to reach out to her, but she was already married to me, with a grade school child, which probably threw off his expectations. It's really childish and annoying that he would harass you out of jealousy. "I'm sorry for causing you trouble," Jessica said, apologizing with her hands together. But of course, I wasn't mad at all. Instead, I felt reassured by Jessica's decisive handling of the situation, feeling strong that together we could overcome anything the future might hold for the factory. Months later, after Mr. Robert resigned, reputedly he was struggling to find new employment due to the rumors of this debacle. Facing rejection after rejection, with his savings depleted and forced out of his home, Mr. Robert fell into poverty, working day labor jobs while in debt to cover living expenses. Juggling multiple jobs, but having to bow to younger supervisors bruised his pride. Eventually, unable to hold down any job for long, he kept moving from one job to another. Now, with any small amount of money he gets, he spends his days drowning in cheap liquor, drawing complaints from other residents in his low-cost apartment. The day he hits rock bottom might not be far off. On the other hand, I am still working with my factory team as an owner. Our relationship with a new company led by Mr. John is flourishing, engaging in ambitious dealings that lead us satisfied. President Jason's company is slowly returning to a healthy state. We look forward to the day we can resume our transactions, a hope shared with my father-in-law. Furthermore, with Leo becoming a middle schooler and gaining independence, Jessica has more time to help out at the factory. For my family and the precious factory, I am committed to doing all I can, confident that together we can face any new challenges. Even if new problems arise in the future, I'm sure we can overcome them with everyone's support. Someday, we'll achieve Jessica's dream of making this factory the best in the States. With this hope in my heart, I step into the factory today, believing that if we tackle it with a mindset that we can do it, success will surely follow. Thanks for watching and see you in the next story.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward.
"Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak.
"There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer."
"Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly.
The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale.
"Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam.
My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father.
Well, you could hardly call it being raised.
After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing.
Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything.
The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke.
Take care. That was our last conversation.
Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment.
Yet, my father never visited me even once.
I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education.
Listen up.
Our work can change the future of our employees.
Don't drag us down.
On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly.
There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies.
You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed.
He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.